all the logs and everything from my backyard are ending up in my front yard, and probably logs from other people's front yards in our backyard, and vice versa. Luckily, I think I managed to save the car. Yep. G'day crew, welcome back. I'm Todd, this is Toxic Garage Customs, and you are in a very noisy Toxic Garage Customs workshop at the moment. It would be fair to say that it is absolutely teeming outside. I was trying to find a gap to say g'day, and there is no gap, so I'll say g'day in the rain. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that Anzac Day was a couple of days ago, and I'd like to acknowledge our servicemen and women and the sacrifices they make and have made in the past to keep our shores safe. I don't think I'm alone when I say that we as Australians appreciate that, and I salute you. So what have I been up to? Well, FrankenInter is back in the house, and I thought it was time to make a tray. So what you see behind me there is the start of a tray. It's not finished yet, and that gets explained in the video why, but that's taken me about 8 days to make, and I spent $65 on steel and probably about $200, $250 on consumables. I reckon it's a cracker of a tray, and if you watch the video, I hope that you agree as well. But more importantly, I hope there's some tips in there that you find useful. So I reckon right now you should go and grab yourself a cold adult beverage, or probably more appropriately, some hot soup or a cup of coffee or something, and get a comfy chair, put your feet up, and watch me make that tray. So I'll catch you at the end of the video. Well, seems like a good time to start building the tray for the Inter. Haven't touched it for a while, so Davina and I were just having a bit of a look, see what design we think. And what I've come up with, I'm going to build a flat tray, which I knew that. So it's not going to be a tub, it'll be a tray. And I'm going to make it so that it comes out to about the edge of my tape measure here, about here. And it'll come out, and then it'll just sort of round off and come into the back of the cab. So it'll probably sit out maybe 50 or 60 mil past the width of the cab, round out, and then come in here. And I'm going to make it out of some steel that I've got around the side, which is pretty big chunky stuff. I think it's 4 inch by 2 inch or 100 by 50. I'm going to have rounded guards. So the guards rounded this way, but rounded off the corners here as well. And they'll stick out past the width of the tray by about that much. So from about here somewhere. So the tray will be flat along the sides, curved at the front, and then the mud guards will just sort of come out and round off. But they won't be sitting up higher than the tray. I've got to work out the exact look of that, but I would say there's no need for the mud guards to come up through the tray at all. Thinking probably a black steel frame with probably timber and some slatted timber sides and headboard. And the corners, that's guinea fowl. They're having a fighting craze at the moment that you can hear. So, well, yeah, let's have a look at the steel that I've got. And around here in the scrap collection, this is the steel that I'm going to use for the sides. So I've got some good lengths of that. There should be enough to make the sides, the front, the back, and probably some bracing. And then all the infill bits I'll worry about later. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drag that out, and I'm going to take some measurements and start building a frame, perimeter frame. Then we'll work it out from there. Follow me along for the adventure. Okay, so Davina was just helping me there. We've got a strategy, we've got a plan. So what we have here, not the heights, we're just working with the widths at the moment. What we've got is that is the line we're working to. It's pretty much in line with the back of the cabin, and it's consistent width. So the whole thing will end up being 1780 across, which is just shy of 6 foot across. And it will make the wheels stick out a little bit. Now these wheels that I've got on are probably not the wheels I'm going to be using. They've got quite a deep dish on them, which is fine, but they do stick out a long way. So I'm making it so that I'm allowing for something like the wheels I've got on Toxic, because they may end up on this, and the dish on those is a little bit less. So it brings it in about 20 mil or close to an inch on either side. I do want the mud guards to stick out just a little bit past the edge of the tray, just because. So I think that should work well. So we've got this. So decided we're going to bring it back to the back of the chassis rail, then 120 millimeters. So the tray will overhang the chassis by 120 mil, which is about 5 inches. And that's to allow to put tail lights underneath the tray. And I've got some tail lights which probably will be what I use, but they won't look like that by the time I've finished with them. I would say that the back corner, I'm going to round it around so that it sort of mimics the curves that are on the cab. And also at the front here, I'm going to bring it forward. So the back of the cab here, it's got quite a curve in it. It's not straight. So I'm going to shape the tray so that it sits out about 50 mil or 2 inches from the back of the tray, follows the curve, but then when it gets to the corner, it comes back around again. So it's got a similar radius to this. So it curves around like this and then back around that way. So I've just got my shape gauge thing here. There you can see some of the curvature just in that corner there. And then it continues around over there. Don't want it too close, don't want it too far away. So I reckon 50 mil will be fine. And then, as I said, that corner won't be sharp, it'll actually be curved. So I've worked out my lengths. So the lengths of the side from the very back of the tray. So this is the chassis measurement, 2140, so another 120 mil. So the back of the tray will be here. From there to that point that I was talking about, the imaginary point where the curve's going to be, 2260. And then it's going to be 1780 wide at the back and 1780 wide at the front. So I'm just going to make the perimeter first. It's actually going to take a while because the first part I'm going to make is the piece across the front here, and it's going to take a whole heap of cuts. Got to cut it a lot of times so that I can get some curvature into it. And then once I've got that curvature, I'll sort of tack it to hold that there. Once I've got that, then I'm going to play around with this corner, and that'll be pie cuts. So I'll leave the outer edge of the steel in place, and I'll cut the inner edge and just keep pie cutting it around. And I'll make a template from cardboard out of the shape I want. Pretty simple process. It's just going to be a bit of toing and froing. I think it's just going to look really nice, because what you're going to see from the top when this tray is done, there's going to be 2 inches or 50 mil of steel visible from the top, timber boards which will sit down probably about 15-20 mil, so 3/4 of an inch down from the surface. You'll see the edges of the tray, that'll look nice, curve following the cab, rounded corners that will reflect this on all 4 corners, and then polished timber on the inside. So regardless of whether I paint this, which I still haven't decided whether it's going to look like this or whether it's going to be painted, regardless of whether I paint it, it's going to have a really nice tray on it, and it'll have nice wheels. Just think it'll look good. So yeah, I guess I should start cutting some steel and making some shape. Oh, and I still haven't decided on the height yet. I like the look of it being low, but just the fact that this cab is so high at the back, it might look a bit funny if it's too low. I am going to put a headboard on it, so the headboard will go from the tray up to a point, and I don't know where. Davina likes this line. I'm just not sure it's high enough. I'm thinking more this line, but it could even be up here. We'll see. So if you've got an opinion, please give it, because it's not going to be done in this video. How high should I do it? But I'm going to build the frame. We can build the frame, pop it in place, chock it up on bits of timber or whatever, and then we can play around with the heights. Enough jitter jatter. Let's cut.
And there's no hurry at all. You just get that bag of highlight and stuff over here, please.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of this, Dave?
I think that works.
That's the same radius as that.
Yep.
And that comes out like that.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that'll be good. Just as I said before, like, because it's just got those rounded soft, I think that'll be good. I like it.
Yep, good. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that shape. So I've got that duplicating the back of the cab, as you saw. And then this here is the same radius as that. And I just got my magnetic parts tray, and that seems like good radius. So I think that should look good once it's done. So now I've got to do lots of cutting. I'm actually thinking 50mm gap towards the back might be a bit much. I actually think that's a good gap, so I'm going to say that's 30mm. So we're going to work with 30mm. And these guys are going to continue to chase themselves and kill each other and harass our chickens. Stupid birds. Okay, that's the finished product. Looks good, doesn't it? So this is my template. I'll take that with me. That's my measurements, 2280 from the longest point, if that went right the way through, back to there, which are going to be rounded off, and 1780 across. Okay, let's start making the front piece. What I've just drawn is a rectangle on the ground, and that rectangle measures 2.28 meters long and 1780 wide. Now, nothing will be bigger than this rectangle. So if this is the front, then this corner will be rounded off, and then it'll be curved across like this, as I explained, and the back corner will be curved as well. But it will all be within the internals of this rectangle. So what I did, drew a straight line on the floor here, and I measured 2280 from point A to point B. Then I squared off this way and squared off this way using a builder's square, and I measured out 1780. Same there. Then I drew another line along here, and I've got my points, 2280, 2280. Now, so what I did was draw a rectangle. Now, did that accurately, obviously, but I used Mr. Pythagoras to tell me what the diagonals should be here. Now, the most important thing if you're trying to set out a rectangle or a square is that if you measure from corner to corner, the diagonal, and then measure from that corner to this corner, if it's truly a rectangle or a square, then these measurements will be the same as each other. Regardless of what they are, they'll be the same as each other if it's truly a rectangle. Otherwise, you've built something that could be a rhombus or a parallelogram. So this is the math, Pythagoras' theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I just called my long side a and my short side b. So this is the back or the front, and this is the side. And then I did a squared. So a squared means a times itself. So 2.28 times itself gives us that number, 51.98. Then b squared, 1.78 times 1.78 gives us that number. Added those two together because it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So add those two together and it gives us this number, 8.36. Now some people come unstuck here. What you need to do is square root that number, and that will tell you the diagonal. It tells us the diagonal should be 2.892 or 2,892 millimeters each direction. I've just put the tape here, so I've got it originating from this corner, and I've got it going through here, and our measurement comes out at 2,894. So it's 2 mil longer than it should be. I'm going to allow that, thickness of pencil and so on. When I checked it this way, it was actually 2,892. So it's 2 millimeters out of square, which is what, a 32nd of an inch or something, out of square over that whole thing. That's going to add up to next to nothing when it comes to the build of this. I could tweak this, I could work out where it is. It just means that one of these lines is either pointing down too far on this one or up too far on that one. Either way, I'm happy to be within 2 millimeters of square across this dimension. So what I now have is a shape on my floor that I can start laying my steel on top of these lines, or inside of these lines, and start playing around with the curve and the corners and all that sort of thing. So I'll try not to walk on these because it's only pencil. I don't want to do it in anything more. But I can now start cutting my steel and so on. And then I'll worry about the shape of the corners and all that sort of stuff once I get there. Having said that, I am actually going to draw the corners using that. I'll use that metal thing that I had before. I'll actually draw the shape of the corners on there so that I don't forget to put them in. Well, Davina hunts the guinea fowl, or tries to shoo off the ones that are attacking ours at least anyway. I've been playing with the truck still. So you can see there the curvature in the back of the truck. What I've done, I've set this spirit level or straight edge up perpendicular to this one, so equal distance. So you can see I've got it nearly touching the back of the cab there, and out at the corners here it tapers in. So I've already made the template for the corners, obviously. What I need to try and work out is the rest of the curve, and I think I'll just make a piece of cardboard, get a a cardboard box and make something that goes from halfway across to here, and then I'll duplicate it on the other side. So this is obviously the halfway point of the cab, so I can measure from there, and then I can do that on the ground. I've set up a piece of cardboard there. It starts at the halfway point and it comes out here. I've already drawn part of the corner up, so I don't need it to come right the way to the end, but I'll draw it as far as I can. Now I just need to duplicate this shape onto here. So there's lots of ways you can do it. I'm just doing it the simplest way I can think of. So I've just got this pulley that was on the shelf, and I'm just going to sit that there, get my marker, put it in here and roll along. Now I've even duplicated the bumps. That's okay. I don't really need the bumps there because I'm going to have an air gap anyway. But all I need to do is transfer that onto my floor. So let's do that. Test. I've cut myself a length there that's about 2 meters long. Well, it's exactly 2 meters long. And the width is 1780. So I've got, whatever that works out, 100 and something mil either side spare. And the reason being is that what I'm thinking of doing is having it so that when I do the curves on the corners, they come around and the join for the sides is along the side. So in other words, this piece, I'll put the curve in it this way, then I'll bring it around that way. Then hopefully I've got enough metal on the ends to be able to weld in my side pieces. As it turns out, I've measured up and I haven't got enough to do all the perimeter. I've need a fourth piece for the back, and being that it's Easter weekend, then I probably won't be getting that soon. But that's okay. It's going to take me a little while to do this. So what I'm going to do, because I need to curve it this way in the first place, I'm going to do a series of cuts along the way. I don't know how many. It's a cut it and see. I'm going to use my drop saw, which is what I use to cut the end of this, because it's faster. It also cuts out about 3 millimeters at a time. So what that means is if I cut out from this side but leave the back intact, or that side intact, then I can close up the cuts that I've done. So if I cut right the way through and just leave the back edge of this steel there, then it should mean I can close it right up, and I should be able to get a fair bit of curve out of each cut. So as I said, I don't know how many I'm going to do, but I'll do a couple, bend it and see what happens. Then when it comes to the corners here, I'll cut on the opposite side, and I'll probably do quite a few cuts there, and because it's quite a tight apex that needs to come around there, whereas this is quite gentle. We'll do this part, then we'll come back to that part. New day, and what a beautiful one it is. Autumn, lovely time of year. So I spent quite a few hours last night making my piece for here, and it's not there because it's sitting at the back of the car. So unfortunately, I forgot to press play at one stage, and while you saw me cutting, you didn't see me welding any of it. Nothing particularly exciting. Basically, I was bending it, welding it, tacking it, and so on. And what I was trying to do was tack it in such a way that when I was welding it, when I was tacking it, I was trying to get it to hold its shape, because anyone that's done welding knows that when you heat things, when you weld them, they like to pull together. So you've got a nice cut, nice angle, nice 90, and you weld it, often it pulls together and ends up being less than a 90. Well, same sort of thing here. So I went along and I tacked front corner at the top, then I flipped it upside down, did the bottom, and then I bored it out here, and it fitted perfectly, like really nicely. It contacted this point, and so on. As you can see now, there's a gap in the middle. It's moved about probably 30 mil in the middle, and what that was caused by, I've got, I think there's about 15 cuts along here. As I've welded them, as I've welded down the face, so on the other side here, the joints have closed up. And it's only been a little bit on each one, but essentially it has closed up enough that it's changed the angle. So, as I said, it was sitting beautifully. So all I'm going to do, I'll go through, I'll choose a couple of spots, maybe here, and the same on the other side. I'll do another cut down through there, and I'll just open it back out again and try and straighten it a little bit. And then I'll carefully weld it back together to try and keep that shape. But that's the effect so far. So what we've got there is a whole bunch of welds along there, and the same on the bottom. I'm happy with it. Definitely not unhappy with it. Just need to adjust it. So that's looking pretty good. So I'll sort that out. But then I'm going to start working on the corners here. Now, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and I think there's going to be a couple of ways of doing it, but we'll get to that when I get to it. So I'm going to adjust this, and then we'll have a look at the corners. I've done 2 cuts, as you saw, one on either side, and I've closed the gap up about half. When I do that, it sort of does put a little bit of a funny kink in it, rather than being a gentle curve. So I don't want to go too extreme on it, because I'm sort of reversing the curve. It's a little bit unnoticeable, and I think once it's all done, said and done, ground and paint and so on, I don't think it'll be noticeable. I think I'm going to leave it where it is. That gap is about, I can stick my finger in there. So remember, this is going to be moved back about, I've decided about 30 mil from the cab. So that side will sit about there. The other side will sit about there, and while I'm balancing it, you can see that the gap is bigger through there, but once there's a headboard and so on, I really don't think it's going to matter. I do need to be careful when I'm welding these 2 up that it doesn't close up again. I did consider cutting it again one more time and opening it up, or 2 more times, but I think I'm going to run with where it is. I'm pretty sure I can live with that. So I'll weld that up, and then we'll get onto the corner. I'm happy with the way it's coming up. I think it's going to look good. I think it's worth the effort to get this curve happening in there. It's got to be more for aesthetics. Well, it's all about aesthetics, all about the way it looks rather than functionality. But I guess that's the whole purpose of a car like this, although I'm building this to be functional. I want it to have a big tray that's usable, but there's nothing wrong with it looking good as well. I'm still undecided when it comes to these corners, and the decision will be made very, very soon, as to whether I try to do my cuts through here to get it to come around. Obviously this is going to be in the way. And so whether I do my cuts here to try and curve this corner, or whether I make it out of a completely separate piece, cut this off and weld the new piece on. That seems like the safe way to go, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to leave this here for the moment. Actually, I'll go and weld it up, and then I'll sit it back here again because it may change shape. But then I'll put my string lines back up, work out where the side of the tray is, and get onto those corners. We'll carry that out, see how she looks. It'll be what it'll be, unless it's shrunk heaps again. Then I'm going to run with it. Don't look too closely at my welding. Some of it, I might have had the amperage turned up a little bit too high. We'll take that out and see how she looks. I've got that all ground down, and I've just gone through and welded up a couple of little pinholes along here. There's a few spots that I need to do along here as well. This is the top edge, so this is the part that will mostly be seen. This part will be facing the cabin, so if you look there, you'll see a little bit of it, and underneath won't get seen very much at all. So I'm trying to make it perfect, or as close to perfect on top as I can. Pretty good along here, and pretty good underneath. So what I've been doing in the first place, I just started off with grinding discs, and I was using them like this mainly, and then flattening them out, trying not to carve into the metal, into the parent metal, just trying to concentrate on the weld. And then I jumped onto these 24 grit papers, and I just put those on my grinder. I don't use these very much. I used to use them all the time, but I haven't for a while, so I've been using flat discs. The reality is, that disc was that big when I started. I've done the equivalent of 45 welds here, and pretty much haven't worn this thing out. If that was flap discs, I reckon I would have used 10 flap discs on that, and then cleaning it up with this. And I find that flap discs, you can tend to carve in a little bit, whereas this here I find that I can lay it very flat and get it flat. You go through a fair few of these. They're about 30 cents each. So I reckon I would have used probably $80 or $100 worth of flap discs to do this. And as it is, I've probably spent $1.20, maybe $2 on those, and well, that $3. So I don't know, you do the math. So I'm going to go through and grind these off. I'll probably just jump straight on these and do it. And then I'm going to lay it down and fill in some holes through here. But I'm happy with it. I think it's coming up really well. I think it will look good once it's completely hidden by everything else. Got this back in position, really happy with it. And Davina and I have actually just spent about 15 minutes getting these string lines exactly where they're supposed to be. So we've measured the diagonals from here to here, diagonals from here to here, the offsets and so on. This is square within a couple of millimeters, so I'm absolutely fine with that. And I've got that marked up here, reference points, and then I've got it marked on the front of the body down here. Just got a sticky tape there, but I've got some little marks on the mudguard, so if it moves. And then I've also got that marked out just here. I've got our front piece perfectly centered to the cab. when I did this, I drew a center line, and I've just been working from the center out all the time. So whenever I put this back, I center it up with the truck, put it there, and I've made this so it's the same overhang as that side. That's what I started off with, so that I could use those as reference points. You'll remember that the radius that I decided I wanted on the front corner of the tray and the rear was based on this. So that's about 150 millimeters, and that was what I placed just here and said, yep, I like that radius, and it's pretty close to that. And I actually put my gauge on there to work out what that was, and that's how I determined this was pretty close to that. So it should mirror it nicely. So the idea is that that's the radius. It's got to come off there. So now I've got to shape this corner or another piece, but whatever I choose, like that. So what I've done is made this cardboard template. It is the same radius as this, and I've cut a circle out of it in the middle so that represents this tube, 50 mil wide, because what I'm trying to work out is how many pie cuts and what size I need to do to turn a flat piece of bar into something with such a tight curve as that. What I've also worked out is that this, there's a party next door, by the way. So I've also worked out that from here to here, that's where the curve's going to be, and then it's going to continue off down on this line here. So what it really means is that I don't need this part of my donut. So that's what my corner is going to look like. That looks like it's sticking out further, but it's actually not. It's just because of the rolled edge on the tube. So that's what my corner is going to look like. And then, of course, pretending that this was a piece of steel, then that will continue along there, and that'll be the edge of it. A lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work, particularly doing 4 of them. But, you know, what do you do? So what I need to do is take this off and work out my pie cuts. So play around with that. Okay, I have no idea if I'm going to be able to explain this or not, but I'll try. This is the piece that I need. You'll see I've folded it up, and I'll explain that in a little while. That's the corner I need. I'm starting off with a piece of steel that looks like that from the top. This outside diameter, outside circumference I should say, is 155 millimeters. How do I know that? I measured it. I used that. I went like that, and I measured it. Did the same thing for the inside. The inside is 60. So we have 155 on the outside, 60 on the inside. That's 95 millimeters difference. So what I've worked out is that I need to leave behind 60 millimeters of metal from here to here, and I need to start with 155 mil. So this from here to here, from end to end, is 155 millimeters long. That's what it will be. And I need to cut out 90 millimeters of steel in here and leave 60 millimeters of area, surface area or length behind. So I'm going to cut out all of these bits here, like that. And hopefully what will happen is that the parts that are left behind will create my internal curve, and obviously the parts that are left behind on the outside will create that. Now it might be a little bit stepped, like a 50-cent piece, but we'll see. So I guess I just need to cut it out and see. So I need to try to stop just before the end. Yep, I've already made a mistake. Meant to leave that one behind. Okay, we'll sticky tape that one back in. I marked it, realised it was wrong, rubbed it out, and still cut it out. I'll weld it back in with sticky tape. I have absolutely no idea if this is going to work, but it seems mathematically correct. We'll see. Okay, let's see. So this is what I need. The curve seems to have come out absolutely spot on, so I'm happy about that. Somehow the measurement that I measured here is different to there. I don't know how that works. I guess the way I measured it, measuring this, it might not have been completely accurate. 150. Thought that's what I measured. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'll try and move this. So obviously they're not all joined up and everything, but so what I'll end up with is the radius on the outside and the radius on the inside. Now, there might be a little bit of welding and grinding to make the shape look beautiful, but I'm pretty happy with that. I really only need as long as my original piece of paper, so I'll only take it to there, and that's what I can mark out. So how this helps me, if I now take that and lay it on my piece of steel, I can just draw around it. Or I could mark it out mathematically, but I've got a template here, so I think I'm just going to lay that on my steel, draw around it, do the cuts. There's got to be finessing, grinding. I've got to do this on the bottom of the steel, the top of the steel, then I've got to cut the sections out the side, so there's got to be a fair bit of room for error. So the errors will be made, and that's what weld is for. I'm pretty happy with the fact that that theoretically is going to work. Oh, maths. Who would have guessed? This is clearly going to work, which I'm really happy about. So, sorry, a truck's just backed up. I've got to cut this little piece out here, and this one here is not closing up all the way for some reason. I might just need to trim a part of it out. It's probably just a little bit stuck there, but what I can see is that I've still got plenty of flex left in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a really good clean up so that I can weld it, and then I'll start tacking it to my templates, either this one or the other one, probably the other one, since that's what I've been using to design this. I've got to find it, the donut, but really happy with that. I think that's working well. So what I was after was that radius there, and that radius there with the consistent 50mm through there. Now there's other ways of doing a radius like that, but you end up with a square corner. This way we get that consistent curve. Very happy. Righto, so after a bit of tweaking, I'm particularly happy with this. So the amount of pipe that I left there was just right, because I'll be able to join the sides on from here. So what I'm doing now is just going through, and with a grinding disc rather than a cutting disc, so with a grinding disc on my grinder rather than the cutting disc, I'm just going through and running it through the top of those cuts, because these are pretty much touching. Some of the inside ones are big open gaps, and that's absolutely fine. I can live with that. That's what welders are for. So I'm going to go through here on all three faces and put a V there, and that way when I weld it, I can fill that up. I can get penetration down into the joint, and then I can grind it off clean later and have this beautiful sweeping curve, the first of 4. So that's what I'm going to do. Then I can start tacking it in place, and once I've got it tacked in place, then once again I can go through, put my template there, make sure I'm happy with it, and sneak up on it. Very happy with the way that's coming up. Well, no doubt about it. This place is a mess, and I'm a mess. But the dividends are. This is what we've got so far. Well, I reckon it's looking pretty good. These lines, that's just some slight cuts there. I'm going to put some, just the tiniest little bit of body filler on this when it comes time to paint it. This is the top surface, so I'm getting it as good as I possibly can. The bottom is not quite as good as that, but it's pretty good because you might see part of underneath it. And so you can see there. And this inside corner, the only part I'm really going to be concerned about is the top sort of 20mm, because when my boards are in here, you'll see that bit. But below that, good enough is good enough. There's going to have to be brackets welded in here to actually mount the thing, and then there'll be some angle iron or something like that that'll come along here that the boards will sit on top of. So there's work to be done in there. This is the perimeter. But I'm particularly happy with the way that's come up. To give you an idea, that took me all day, and I reckon we're probably talking around about 9 hours by now, just to do that and to finish off this part here to correct it a little bit. So I'm a good 2 days into this so far, which, yes, that's a long time, and could have just made that straight and it would have taken me about half an hour. But doesn't it look nice? If I was in it for the money, I'd be broke. So this side should be much faster. and then the sides are straight in the first place, and then the back will have some corners like this. But the first one's always the one that takes the time. I've got this. I've got that thing, and I've got my numbers that I used to do these cuts written down, so I can do the same thing. And I'm very happy that I did this on the end of this bar rather than make a little piece, because I don't think I would have been able to bend it. I needed the weight of that to be able to lever this, but it came out well. So tomorrow I'm going to have a bit of a clean up, and I'm going to lay this thing on the floor and see what it actually looks like. Remember I said about not walking over my pencil marks? Yeah, well, that idea didn't last, but just here somewhere with my pattern. So I'll sit that on there, and I'll see if that corner that I've just done looks like that corner just there. Fingers crossed, eh? As it looks at the moment, now this corner here, I've got to make a slight adjustment to it. I've overbent it. You can see the line here where it's supposed to be aiming, and it's kinked in a bit. So I'm going to cut it just here, just bring it around again, just so that that's carrying down there, and then I'll be happy with it. So I'll have to cut it. It'll open up a joint through here, and then I'll have to weld it up again. That's okay. I cut it and sprung it open, and it actually was under a bit of pressure too, so it sort of did pop out, not this far. Belted it with a hammer when it was down on the floor. Actually opened up surprisingly more than I thought it would, so I need an infill piece for that. So here's some I prepared earlier. So it's almost like I took one slice too many out of this. I'll weld that in, and it'll be good, but I'm not going to worry about that right at the moment, because I'm going to do some surgery on the other side and get another one of these happening, and then I'll finish the sides once I've got both sides done. We're at this point again. I've cut the same amount of little sectors out. The reason being is that rather than do it differently, I'm doing it the same as I did before, but I'm going to try and control how far I'd bend it. What I didn't do was actually place the job onto my drawing here and try and work the corner out from there. I used my template, so that was my mistake there. It was a mistake. So I've got some reference points. I've got it drawn on the ground, got a center point. I keep referring to that center point all the time. I can't stress enough to have reference points to just keep going back to every time. Well, what can I say? No hitting with a hammer, just a big shifter, and I've got that. So this side is looking good, just got to fix that slither, and this side came together beautifully. Still got to weld it. It'll possibly close up a little bit, but it's sitting there under its own steam at the moment, so what can I say? Pretty happy. Got to run a series of tacks on one side, series of tacks on the other side. I put it back in place, see what it looks like, and then carefully weld it and hope that it doesn't do that business where it pulls in. Happy, happy. And that is that side done. So that's the side I just did, and that's that side that I had to repair. It's come up well. So I've measured it. It is exactly 1780 millimeters from tip to tip. So I cannot be happier with that. Seriously cannot be happier. I've decided that the back corners, these parts down here, I'm going to make them rounded on the outside but square on the inside. I think it'll be more practical, whereas I'm really just happy with the look of this. I've got some designs, some ideas for my headboard to come up, so we'll worry about that when that time comes, but there'll be some more cutting, bending of steel when I do that. So we are ready to put the sides in. So I think I said earlier, I think I've got enough steel to do the whole thing now, but what I'm going to do is I'll make the sides up out of these, and I will include the bent corners in those. So with these, I will have at least the sides done on each side, and then I will have, I'll just have to source some material for the back, and then obviously there's bracing and plates and all that sort of stuff, so there's a lot more work to go on it. But this has taken me good on 3 days. So to give you an idea, might not look like much, but 3 days of effort. But it's paid off because I think it's really good. So we'll move on to that next. But I'm going dirt bike riding tomorrow, so it'll have to wait. Time to get onto the sides. I'll clean this up, then I'll show you how I'm going to do it. I have that length all cleaned up, ready to go. I haven't cut it to length yet. Now, I've already done one side, so I'm doing this as a, here's one I prepared earlier kind of thing. So this is what I'm about to reproduce. So on the back corner, I've decided to go for more of a sharp 90 on the inside. It's got a little bit of a curve, and then the radius on the outside. And the reason being, I think it'll work nicely to have boards sit in there nice and square, whereas on the front I do want that sort of decorative look. So I think it'll look all right being different from front to back, and at the end of the day it'll be what it'll be, but I think it'll look good. So let's have a look at the method here. Now, in the words of the famous Gene Winfield, may he rest in peace, every day is a school day. So following that line, I like to go down the path of trying to learn something every single day. So the method that we're going to use to do that corner is something that I learnt on YouTube. There's plenty of videos on it, but I'm going to make another one to show you and put it into place here. So let's run through it. I'll explain this as best I possibly can. So the first thing we need to do, well the very first thing I need to do is work out where I want to bend it from. So I'm going to bend this from here, and I'm going to swing it around this way. Why? Because I've already done one swinging around the other way. I like to have it, when I'm working with steel, I like to have it so that I'm using the smooth edge for the visible edge. And what I mean by that is, when they make this steel, you see this line just here? That's a join. So I like to have that on the bottom, just because why have it on the top? I've already marked, this is the point that I want my corner to start originating from. So what I'm going to end up with is a corner that has that radius on it there, and then the tube will come out here, and in fact it'll be this tube that comes out here. So what we're going to do is cut out a bunch of steel through this area here, and we're going to get this part of the pipe and pull it around and weld it back in. So this outer edge will remain continuous, so it'll be a nice smooth curve. There'll be a weld in the inner corner, and there'll be a weld in here and around here. So how do we start? The first thing I do is make a circle. So I just got a drawing compass, like out of a school compass set, and drew a circle. And the radius, so from here to here, the radius of the circle is the width of my steel, which is 50 millimeters. So in imperial, 2 inches. So what I did was just got a piece of cardboard, I got my ruler, I set my compass to 50 millimeters and just drew a circle like that. Then I ran a line through the middle so that I could cut out this. Now I could have done that simply by folding my cardboard in half and then folding it in half again, and that would have shown me the exact middle. I didn't do it that way, but I could have. So what I've ended up with is this piece and this piece. And this, as I said, is where I want my corner to originate from. So I'm going to square that up. So this is where my 90-degree angle is going to be. So I'm going to square that up just there. And then what I'm going to do is, I can use either of these, but what I want is that curve just there to come around here. So I can either use it that way, or I can hold that there and use it that way, whichever I want. I'm going to do it that way because it almost works like a building square. So I'm just going to, I've just got to make sure that this edge here is right on the edge there, and that is there. And as I said, this was a 50mm radius, so that's why it's the same width as the steel. It wasn't by chance. And I'm using that right against there and got this against there like a square. So I'm going to draw this around here, and I've got to follow it right the way around to here. And then I'm going to also, oh, I need that back again, please assistant. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from here using the outer circumference of my quarter of a circle, and I'm going to find that point right there. And then I'm going to square that across through there. So the first thing I can say is we're going to be removing all this metal here. What else is going to happen is that I need to leave behind a slither of metal through here, just the wall of this tube, because it's going to become the outer edge. So this is 3mm, so I'm just going to eyeball it, and I'm going to draw a line there. So that I'm going to be cutting around here, around there. This is remaining, this is remaining. Then what I'm going to do is transfer this across the face and then onto the other side. Like such, and then onto the other side over here using the same method. I'm going to draw these through here so I can reference them, and then I just need to mark it out in the same way that I did on this side. So I always like to look back. Okay, so my semicircle needs to go that way. So I'm going to put that like I did on the other side. Round like that. So now what I know is that this is going to be removed, this is going to be removed, and this is going to be removed. And the only other step that I need to do as far as marking out goes is to draw my 3mm eyeballed line through here. I'm actually just using the apex of that radius just there. So once again, this remains, this sleeve remains, and then this remains. And this remains around here, so I need to make sure that I don't go cutting that out. So this part comes out. There's a little bit of finessing. I'll jump in and do the cuts. I'll put you on time lapse while I do the cuts so you can see what I'm doing there. But then I'll bring you back and show you what I did and why I did it. There'll be questions at the end. I'll finish cutting this off in a second. What you can see is that this tube, when it's made, it's actually under tension. So I guess it contains energy, really. When you cut it, it springs one way or another. Always be aware of that, because I usually find that when you cut it like this, it springs away from you. It wants to bend open rather than closed. But sometimes it does bend the other way, and it can pinch the blade on your angle grinder. So for that reason, when you're cutting, it's always recommended to only use a very shallow depth of your blade. Try not to sink the blade right into the metal, because if it does pinch, then, or if you twist it, it breaks. Whereas if you're just using the tip, there's less chance of that happening. So I'll finish cutting this, and then we'll take that piece out, and then we can start having a look at the shape we've created. Righto, so I've given that a good clean up. I've gone through and tried to chamfer the corners as much as I can, so grind them to a bit of a 45-degree angle. It cleans off any scrap and so on, but also when I pull it together, it'll allow me to get weld in there so that I can grind it off flat and so on, as I've explained before. Now, I don't think that I'm going to be able to get I'm going to put a shifter on this, a shifter, and pull this right the way around, because it'll have a fair bit of spring in it. So what I did with the other one was I stood it up. So if I can't get this around, I'll show you, but I'm probably going to stand it up to hold it in place while I'm welding it. This is where a welding fabrication bench where you can clamp everything down would come in handy, but I don't have one of those. So once again, trusty old shifter. And what's going to happen is this going to bend from here around here, and then this edge is going to tuck around there in a perfect weld. I may need to go back and do a little bit of grinding. You can see how much that's sprung open as well. So I'll lay it like this and see if I can get it to go. The last one I had to use a big persuader on it as well. I know my arm's in the way, but hopefully you can see what's starting to happen there. So I did trim up this edge a little bit on the last one, but I think by the time I take this air out of here by banging it in, this will come around nicely. I think I'm going to do this by standing it up, however, as I said. So just using anything that's available to me. I've got this column in my shed here, and I know that it's plumb, true, and it's mounted at a 90-degree angle or square to the ground. So I've just got my bit of steel clamped in place there to stop it from moving, and I'm just manipulating the corner to make it square. As it is at the moment, I think it's bent a little bit too far, so I'm just going to correct that, and then while it's there, I'm going to go through and I'm going to tack it in place as well. But you can see what we've created there, and that is a nice radius on the outside there, and it'll be a 90-degree corner on the inside. That hole in the top there, by the way, is just a hole that was already in the metal. I'll weld that up, it's no biggie. And you can see there how I've chamfered the corners and how it's got the rounded edge on the steel as well. So just here I've chamfered these edges so that I can get some weld penetration. This I'm not going to grind square anyway, because the timber will be visible from the top, and so this top bit will be the neatest, and then down here doesn't matter. I could have heaps of weld there if I wanted. This rounded edge, I'm going to be able to get plenty of weld in there, the same on the top, and then I've got to come around and do this radius, and I'll put plenty of weld in there and grind it back so that I get this same nice radius on the tube. So I'll get that square, tack it up, and then I'll bring it back. Just about undo this, but what I have done is nearly tripped over and broke my neck. What I've done is put in some 45-degree angles here. I've taken it out as far as I can. In fact, this end butts into that back brace, so hopefully it all works to keep it square. But also I've dropped these right down to the base, so the same plane as the perimeter, so that I can put some plates on there, and that will become essentially my mounting points to mount the frame to the chassis. So a bit of a double whammy. So what we're going to see here in just a second is, does it go pop and let me down? Here goes. Yep. Righto. We'll do a measurement, see how it is, and to be completely honest, as long as you don't tell anyone, no one will ever know. Not a single soul. We have 2,857. $2,846. Okay, we're 11 mil out of square. Perfect in my book. Righto, so I wasn't happy with it. I took that brace off again. It's now upside down to where it was before, so it's literally upside down. So I took that brace off. I wasn't happy with it. It had actually been welded on too low, so this way too far, and I wasn't happy with the squareness. So I cut it off, re-ratchet strapped it, welded it again. It's better than it was. It's now 5 mil out of square. I am happy to live with 5 mil out of square, but more importantly, I got that thing at the right height. Yesterday, Josh and I moved the Commodore and we got the tray up onto the hoist, and now I'm going to see if I can actually get the International started after several months of just sitting out in the weather by its lonesome, so that we can reverse it under that tray and start seeing the fitment and making some mounts. So it's been sort of strange weather here lately, been a lot of rain, so I'm going to try and get it while the sun's out, because as it is at the moment, anything could happen in half an hour's time. It looks pretty nice at the moment, and I have to say it's a beautiful temperature. It's only probably about 20 degrees, I reckon. It's lovely. Okay, so if you're new here, then this is the International. If you've been here before but can't remember, this is the International. So it's a 52 International L110 sitting on a HJ Holden 1-tonner chassis, 253 Trimatic 10-bolt diff. I've had this for a couple of years. I started it before we moved up here, sat for a long time, and then the very last time you saw it, and the last time I saw it, was when I actually got it running and driving. I already had it running, but I actually got it driving. So the brakes don't work properly, it's got no exhaust, the transmission doesn't shift properly, it doesn't idle fantastically, so it's perfect, ready for a blue slip. But hopefully it'll start. I'm confident. I managed to get it running okay last time. It's not perfect. I think the timing's out. No, I really haven't done anything. I just got it running, driving. I was pretty excited. Did a shed skid, and that was the end of it. So we'll see if she starts, and if she does, I'll let it warm up for a minute, and then we'll drive it where it needs to go. Fingers crossed. I'd love to say that I have a key, but I don't. I actually have a little thing called the Fire in the Hole 3000, which I've got a video on that. I turn the ignition on with a button, then push another button, pump the throttle a couple of times, and hopefully she starts. Gotta be happy about that. Sounds pretty good. So she's starting up, and then as I drive along, as soon as I put it into gear, I go about 5 meters, if that 3 meters, and stops again. It's almost like running out of petrol. There's fuel in the fuel filter. So I remember last time I was working on it, there was a blockage in the carby, and I sort of cleaned it out, but I wasn't convinced that I'd got it completely sorted. But that's okay. We'll keep working along with that. I don't want to knock the tray off the hoist. Okay, that was simple.
It's not a practical height.
It's a good skid though.
Okay, so you may have determined from that a couple of things. The brakes don't work very well. The tyres are rock hard. It's got no weight in the back. And all it wants to do is skid the tyres. Makes me look like a hoon. Well, I am, but not at this particular point in time. What I didn't want to do was reverse back and knock my tray onto the ground. Davina thinks it's too high at the moment, but I'm pretty happy with it. So, we're not getting any work done by talking about it, are we? Well, that sits exceptionally well. I'm really happy with that. I think the proportions work perfectly. The curves I'm really happy with, like this curve here where it joins into the cab. I think that just works really well. As I said, they're not the wheels that'll be on it, but even if they were, I'm just going to put little guards that pop out further anyway. I'm just looking at the mounting. I did actually mess up a measurement at the back here. Rookie error. That is 140 mil from there. I forgot about the thickness of the tube. I can't believe I did that. But you know what? I'm actually happy with it because I was debating whether it needed to be longer than what I had planned anyway. And now that it's there, it's a bit hard to see the full view from here. Now that it's here, I think the proportions are right, and it might have looked a little bit short otherwise. So I'm happy with that error. This is tray mounting point on the Holden chassis, same here, and then we have this one here, same on the other side. So when I put these braces in, I did plan that I would be able to use them, and what I'm now thinking, I didn't have a plan, but I did plan that I would use those. So I was thinking I could put some sort of plate off here and then work out how to mount it elsewhere. So I could do that. I could have something that comes right the way across. And at the front, I could do a similar thing. But what I am actually thinking is to use a bigger section offcut of the pieces off the side here. So this stuff here. And I'm thinking of either bridging it from here through to here, or running it from the rail here to the rail here, and then cutting an access hole in it so that I can get to a nut and bolt to get to this. And I'm thinking to have it go from the outer rail to the outer rail rather than to the inner rail, and that way it'll brace this whole corner. It'll bear the load of this whole corner of the tray. It's a big section, and as I said, easy to drill a hole into to get an access point. So I think that's the way I'm going to go. In hindsight, probably could have done the same at the back. Okay, as you saw, a fair bit of toing and froing, backwards and forth, just checking it. So I marked it initially just by laying the piece of steel there and then marking it with a permanent marker underneath. Brought it to the table and cut it, and then adjusted it because it's not a usual shape. You know, it's got a curve on one end, over this end obviously. So backwards and forwards, got it fitting good enough. and it's always comforting to see that when you get the piece and you flip it over to the other side, that it fits the other side just as well. That tells me that this side is symmetrical with that side, which is what I had hoped for, it's what I'd tried for, and it's just good when a plan comes together. So this one here is for the other side. I could use it on this side because it's the same, it's just upside down, but just there is where my mount will go. So I'll weld these in place, and then, I'll work out exactly where the access hole needs to be. I'll hole saw that. I'll put a bolt down through there to locate it so it lines up with the mounting points and so on, and then I'll weld it in place. I'm not keen to weld it in place while it's sitting on the chassis because the fuel tank is right there and I can smell fumes when I'm over there. Angle grinder, not too concerned about. Welding immediately above it, don't really want to do that. So I'll make a second one of these and then we'll go from there. I may get these in before worrying about the back. I haven't got enough steel in the larger section to do what I had hoped at the back there, so you can see a piece of steel just sort of sitting there at the moment. I may end up using it something like that, but we'll see what happens. I need my mounts to sit nice and flush with the bottom of my frame here. So what I'm doing is just getting some of these steel plates and clamping them to the frame, to the tray, so that I can just sit my brace straight on top of them. And then they should be at exactly the right height. It means I don't have to have an extra spare set of hands as well. Just got to make sure I keep the clamps out of the way. Okay, so they're in place. I'll get my brace. Sit it in place there. And I'm right to go. But before I continue on any further, I need to put my hole in. So I'll show you on the other side. So I've already got this side tacked in, I've got the hole drilled. So I've drilled a 13mm or 1/2 inch hole underneath there, and it is straight on top of the hole that is the brace. This one here, a bit hard for me to get it out at the moment, but that drops down through the hole in the brace. And then I've done this other hole, which I don't even know what size it was, it just looks big enough to put a ratchet in. What is it? It's about 45mm, 45mm. And that's so I can get a ratchet and a socket in there to do it up. What I will probably end up doing in any case is have it so the bolt comes up from underneath and put a captive nut in here, but I'm still going to need to get in there. It's just a matter of how well I can get my welder in there. But that should be enough room for me to be able to get my welder in there and weld the nut in place. But if I don't decide to do that, if I just decide to have a bolt that comes down and a nut, then I can do that as well. It's just once the tray is on here, I won't be able to access this without taking the tray out. So I think I'm going to weld a captive nut in there and bring a bolt in from underneath so that when I want to ever take the tray off, then it's easy. I don't have to hold two things, I can just undo it. So what I did was get it all lined up, get everything lined up. Then I came up with a Sharpie marker from underneath and worked out where the hole was, which I'm going to do on that side. And once I did that, then I went over and I drilled some holes. So I'll put you on a time lapse to see what I do when I drill the hole, but I'll just take you back so you can see me marking it out. I'm going to centre punch this first, and then I'm going to drill a pilot hole with that, which is about a 4 or 5mm drill bit. And I've got it long enough, so this is the bottom. I've got it long enough so that I can drill through the hole that I marked and through the other side as well. And the reason for that is I'm doing a pilot hole just to start off, and then I'll step up 2 drill bit sizes until I end up with a 13mm or 1/2 inch. And then once I've done those, I'm going to use my hole saw, and the pilot hole that is popping through the other side will be where I'll start this, and that way this will be perfectly in line with the underside hole. So using this one hole to start off with. So I'll just center punch this. And I like to use a little bit of Venom lubricating fluid, that or anything else quite frankly, to help lubricate it. I'm just going to hold this while I'm drilling it, but when I get to a bigger drill bit size, I like to clamp it in place so that it doesn't decide to start spinning around and cut my fingers off. Just letting the drill do the work. Need to move this up a bit. Unfortunately, I've got to do this without dropping it on my foot because the splines to wind the handle up and down to adjust the height are broken. Okay, so I have a hole on the other side, and as I said, that'll be the hole that I use to start off when I'm doing my hole saw. Now you don't need to watch me drill holes, I'll bring you back when I do the hole saw. I've done the 13mm hole on the other side, got my hole saw in place, and got it clamped in place. Now to explain, when I'm drilling a small hole, there's not a great amount of leverage effect, I guess, I don't know if it's the right term, torque perhaps, that a small drill bit can provide. But the bigger the drill bit you've got, or hole saw or whatever, the more surface area there is that it can grab whatever you're drilling into, and when it grabs it, it'll spin it around. And if you're not on the game, it can spin around and it can hit you. Now I know that if this grabs, it's going to hit the back of the drill before it does anything anyway, but nevertheless I kind of value my fingers and I don't like pain, so I'm clamping it, because if it's going to grab, it'll grab now. And the reason I'm using a drill press, and you don't have to have one of these, you can use a drill, and I've used a drill plenty of times for this, but the reason I'm using a drill press, one, I own one, and two, when I'm drilling from one through to the other, one surface through to the other, I want to have it perfectly vertical so that those holes are perfectly lined up. Now I can do that with a drill, I'm not too bad with a drill, but if you lean the drill a little bit, then the holes don't line up perfectly and it just makes it hard to drop the bolt from the top to the bottom and so on. Again, not mandatory, just I've got it, so I'm using it. So I'm going to drill this. This has got a drill bit here that'll start in the pilot hole. Once the hole saw contacts, I'll put some lubricant there, and then I'll just take it slow. I've just got my drill on quite a slow speed as well to not overwork anything. All the Venom cutting fluid does is lubricate it, which helps to cool it which means that it's an easier job, but it also protects your tool so that you're not chewing the teeth out and overheating it. But what we have is our access hole for a socket and our bottom hole for the bolt to go through. So that's ready to be welded in. I'll just buzz over it with a flat disc, but other than that, it's ready to weld in. I'm going to center punch this first, and then I'm going to drill a pilot hole with that, which is about a 4 or 5 mil drill bit. And I've got it long enough, so this is the bottom. I've got it long enough so that I can drill through the hole that I marked and through the other side as well. And the reason for that is I'm doing a pilot hole just to start off, and then I'll step up 2 drill bit sizes until I end up with a 13 mil or ½ inch. And then once I've done those, I'm going to use my hole saw, and the pilot hole that is popping through the other side will be where I'll start this, and that way this will be perfectly in line with the underside hole. So using this one hole to start off with. So I'll just center punch this. And I like to use a little bit of Venom lubricating fluid, that or anything else quite frankly, to help lubricate it. I'm just going to hold this while I'm drilling it, but when I get to a bigger drill bit size, I like to clamp it in place so that it doesn't decide to start spinning around and cut my fingers off. Just letting the drill do the work. Got my hole saw in place and got it clamped in place. Now to explain, when I'm drilling a small hole, there's not a great amount of leverage effect, I guess, I don't know if it's the right term, torque perhaps, that a small drill bit can provide. But the bigger the drill bit you've got, or hole saw or whatever, the more surface area there is that it can grab whatever you're drilling into, and when it grabs it, it'll spin it around. And if you're not on the game, it can spin around and it can hit you. Now I know that if this grabs, it's going to hit the back of the drill before it does anything anyway, but nevertheless I kind of value my fingers and I don't like pain, so I'm clamping it, because if it's got to grab, it'll grab now. And the reason I'm using a drill press, and you don't have to have one of these, you can use a drill, and I've used a drill plenty of times for this, but the reason I'm using a drill press, one, I own one, and two, when I'm drilling from one through to the other, one surface through to the other, I want to have it perfectly vertical so that those holes are perfectly lined up. Now I can do that with a drill, I'm not too bad with a drill, but if you lean the drill a little bit, then the holes don't line up perfectly and it just makes it hard to drop the bolt from the top to the bottom and so on. Again, not mandatory, just I've got it, so I'm using it. So I'm going to drill this. This has got a drill bit here that'll start in the pilot hole. Once the hole saw contacts, I'll put some lubricant there, and then I'll just take it slow. I've just got my drill on quite a slow speed as well to not overwork anything. All the Venom cutting fluid does is lubricate it, which helps to cool it, which means that it's an easier job, but it also protects your tool so that you're not chewing the teeth out and overheating it. But what we have is our access hole for a socket and our bottom hole for the bolt to go through. So that's ready to be welded in. I'll just buzz over it with a flat disc, but other than that, it's ready to weld in. All going well. This will do what it's supposed to do. I have got a indication mark there just so I can get it in the same spot. Lines up, hopefully this drops down straight through that, which it does, straight through the point that I wanted it to. So I'll leave that there when I tack this in place. I do have a conundrum, which you may have already identified, that's that I don't want to weld it while the fuel tank's below me. So I'm not going to leave that there going through this while I weld it, because what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be lifting the frame up on the hoist, rolling the truck out of the way a bit to get the vapours away, and then weld it. So I just got to make sure the thing doesn't move is really what it comes down to, and hence the marks that I've got there are going to help me. Well, I got it tacked in after rolling the truck forward and covering the fuel tank, and I thought, oh, I'll finish welding it in. Well, that's not going to happen because I just ran out of wire. I think I've got another spool, but if not, then it might just slow things down. Got those finished. Actually had to change my wire. I ran out of wire. I was using 0.8 of a mil wire because that's what I usually have in there. And I only had some 0.9, so I had to feed that through, change my tips, change the rollers and so on. That's okay, got that welded up. And I've decided I'm going to use this stuff across here, out like that, as I mentioned before. But as it has it, I didn't have enough, so I've got these pieces prepared. I'm going to weld those through there. Got to weld that up. Weld those through there. I'll make it into one piece so I can cut it into the right shape. So that's the go there. So this piece is long enough, this piece isn't. So I'll weld that up, let it sit for a while, and then I will start cutting it. And I'll try not to burn myself again by leaning on the hot metal. So I made a longer piece out of two short pieces, as I said. I'm not going to grind that weld down. It actually has heaps of penetration. In fact, the joint was about 3 mil wide, so there is a heap of weld in there, so I got no problem with the strength. But I'm going to leave it up because it's not going to be in the way. So this piece of steel is going to go in there, like that, so the weld won't be in the way. I've got this one done. I'm happy with the design. I think it works well. So once again, the hole through there. This is 40 mil, this is 50 mil, so I just put some cuts there and banged the end of it down. But I've got that blazed in most parts. All the underside welding's got to be done, but I'm pretty happy that that's not going to go anywhere. So it's all flush underneath here. So it'll give the whole bottom of the tray is flat, so it doesn't matter what I do. I just adjust my riser heights to adjust the height of the tray. So I'm going to mark this one out, and all I'm doing is simply putting it underneath, working out where I want it. I've got my marks there, so it's the same as the other side. It's going to come through like this. I'll trace it from the top, and then I'll cut it and do the rest of it. So basically I'm going to be cutting something like that off. I'll do that. I'll just show you this. So I just overlaid that, put it there, trace the shape as I need to, so that's pretty straightforward. Now to transfer this shape onto the back, what I'm doing, I'm going to use my square and transfer it onto the other side. So using my square to transfer that line across like that. And then the same here. So across like that. And then I need to know this angle. So I'm using my sliding bevel, this tool here, and how that works. See how it is compared to the other side. So it's a little bit different. So I just adjust that until it is that same angle. flip it over and transfer it. Oops, transfer it back this way. Come back to there somewhere. Just double check I'm going the right way. Yep. And then, not sure if it's the same angle, but it should be. Yep, same angle for that because this is a 90, so this is the opposite half of that. So all I'm going to do is the same thing here. Transfer that through from that point there, maybe that point there, to there. And all going well, I have got that transferred from one side to the other, and I now have my cutting line, and it should look something similar. The angle is slightly different, but it should look something similar to that. But I didn't just use this one and overlay it because one side is not identical to the other. Pretty close, but not identical. I can cut that out. New day, you'll hear a bit of water on the roof because it's actually really wet out there. Now we're expecting a lot of rain over the next couple of days, but I've got a shed, so I don't care. So that's what I achieved yesterday, and I'm really happy with it. Now what I'm doing today, and I've just got that board sitting there. It's really handy because I've built myself a mobile workbench. So I've got that board sitting there, and that probably gives a pretty good indication, well it does give a pretty good indication of what I'm looking at as far as the lip around there. So that board's not level, but that's sort of the lip that we're hoping for, so that stuff doesn't slide off. So that's about the thickness of the boards that I'll be using, the decking boards, the planks, whatever I end up using. At the moment, I'm just cutting a piece of angle iron to go across here. Once again, I'll mount it at the same height as the top of these, and that will be the rear mount for the boards to go onto. I'm using angle iron because it seems the right thing to do. So I've just notched it out in certain spots across the back there just to go around the framing members. I'll transfer the line of my frame through to the back of the tray here, clamp this in place, and then put some welds on it. I don't think I'll drill. I was going to say I might plug weld it, but I don't think I will. I'll just put a few welds, some runs of weld, I don't know, maybe 10 of them along the top, some along the bottom as well. That should be fine. It's only holding like a short span of decking boards when the time comes. And then the front one will be the same, but the front one's going to have to be curved, as we know. So I'll use a similar sort of principle. It doesn't have to look pretty, so I'm just going to put some pie cuts in it, in the top to bend it around, weld it and be done with it. I will give it all a bit of a clean up before I weld it on because this has got a bit of surface rust on it. Because I am going to be priming this. I'm probably going to be epoxy priming it because number one, I've got it. I use it a lot, and two, because as I've explained before, I'll probably be putting a bit of body filler, and I like to put body filler over epoxy primer. But if I don't get that excited about body filling and so on, then I may just do it in etched primer, black or grey etched primer, and then paint it probably satin black as the finish. That's later. So we're probably nearing the end of this video. I'll keep making this and that one, and I'll do some braces across here to the middle. But other than that, there's probably not going to be a lot more in this because until I know, my wheel size, the thickness of my decking boards, etc., etc., then I don't want to start fabricating the guards. I don't want to get too carried away with the headboard, so I lift the tray up. I don't want the headboard to be higher than what I visually want it. And I've got some ideas for that. So I just had ideas for all this, but I've got some ideas, and it'll be quite visual, the headboard and the side bits. So I want to get it right, because I think the ideas that I've got will look simple, be a little bit complicated to do, but look pretty darn cool. So I won't rush into that. But this part is bolted down. All I got to do is play around with the heights. I can drive this thing around and this wouldn't fall off now. So I'll keep going with this, that, and those, and then I'll bring you in right at the end. I'll probably show you a little bit along the way anyway. Something I like to try and do when I'm building anything is try and find something that I can use as a gauge of consistency. And what I mean by that is that when I put these rails in across here, I sat them on some pieces of pipe on the ground when I was welding them to the frame, so they were all at the same height. And this 40mm tube happens to be that height. So the reason I say that is for me to be able to consistently get this piece of angle iron at the right height, I can just use this as a gauge of accuracy. So I sit it there, tap the piece of angle up or down, and clamp it in place. So it's just a simple thing to work to. I'm not measuring up or down or anything like that. I literally just have this, sit it there, make sure that's right. I'm going to weld it in place. Simples. Anything that makes life easier. Time to weld. As the rain falls heavily on the roof. So what you've just seen me do there was bend that piece of angle to conform to the shape. Now, it seemed logical to me that when I did the front tube, I put my cuts at 100mm spacings, originating from the center and working out. So I did exactly the same on this. So the angle goes like that and then down. So on this upper edge, I put cuts right the way through, right the way through the top. And I did those the same amount, which I think was 15 of them from memory, that I did in that front tube. Now, I knew that when I came to this outer bit, because it curved the opposite way, I was going to need to do some pie cuts. So in the first place, I just did a straight cut. And then what you saw me do was I clamped it in place and just kept belting it with a hammer. No finesse whatsoever, just belting it and trying to get this to close up. And as I needed to cut more out, I cut more out. I cut a bit too much out on the other side, but that's fine. And then I managed to get it closed up. So all it really needs to do is to be able to have boards that can sit on top of it to be fixed down. So the fact that this doesn't come right the way to the edge doesn't concern me at all. It's got enough that I'll be able to get a couple of bolts or screws through it, I have no doubt. And you know what? If not, then I'll tack a little piece on the end. It's only metal, you can weld it. So I must say that when I was angle grinding above the fuel tank here, I was just waiting, but I can't smell the fumes, and I put that canvas over the top of it so I didn't explode. So what I'm going to do now that I've got this all clamped in shape, and if you have a look at that, it conforms to that shape absolutely beautifully. So I'm going to go along and I'm just going to tack each one of those in place. I'll leave it clamped, so hopefully it won't close up on me. And we know that if it does, then I can do more cuts and open it back up. But hopefully it won't, because I've got plenty of clamps on it. I'll tack it, and then what I'm going to do is take it off and I'll weld it from the other side, because if I put welds along here, then my decking boards are just going to sit on top of them. If I grind them flat, I'm going to lose strength in the weld and so on. So I'll tack it in the top to hold it in place, weld it fully from the back, and then I'll grind the top ones off again. It's wet out there. We've got a creek down the back. It only is a creek when it rains, and as it is at the moment, it's quite high. I don't mind that, I like the rain. Okay, so this piece here that I was last discussing is all done. Actually ended up leaving it clamped in place and welding it all along the top, because I figured it would hold its shape, and it did perfectly. Didn't bow, warp, twist, move at all. So then I flipped it over, put a good seam of weld along all the joints, and then, as I said, ground it off on the other side, and then I've cut those notches out to drop over my corner braces. So it's ready to go in. Did I mention that it was raining? Well, what do you reckon? I'm really happy with it. I really enjoyed making these corners and the corners on the back there. I did some things that I haven't done before, which I always try to do, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll be making another tray like this at some point in time, because I like the feel of it. So if you like this, you like my content, you like the video, what I do, why don't you give me a thumbs up? And even more importantly, if you haven't subscribed, please do. It's free. And perhaps share my channel with someone else. I'm growing as a channel, I'm growing in content, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And that's because of you guys. So why don't you go and grab yourself an angle grinder, some second-hand steel, and go and make something. But as always, make sure you be safe doing it. So until then, stay dry. I'll catch you next time. See you later. So it would appear that our horse is landlocked, because he came in here and now he can't get back out again. Actually no, he can get out on the veranda. They say properties with water views are worth money, so I think ours has just gone up in value. All the logs and everything from my backyard are ending up in my front yard, and probably logs from other people's front yards in our backyard, and vice versa. Luckily, I think I managed to save the car. Yep. Well, I'm happy. The Calais didn't go under the water, and that will mean that Audrey didn't as well. I was a bit concerned, I have to say. Oh, I got more water bubbling out of the ground. It's bizarre. She's wet. Well, that's pretty comforting to know. Water had come through, but not much. I lost a wood pile somewhere. Trailers are still there.